It's funny too because in Supernatural, Mark Pellegrino, or the guy who plays Jacob, is actually the devil.
You know who I am. Lucifer. Yes.
So Richard goes to the statue and draws the knife, but he gets owned by Jacob, who goes all Chuck Norris on him. Richard asks where Isabella is, and Jacob wants to know whether or not he met the Man in Black. In response to Richard's question about his wife, Jacob says that he did see someone, but that it wasn't his wife, and that they're not dead and in hell like the Man in Black claimed. To prove his point, he begins to drown Richard, maybe just an aggressive baptism, and Richard yells out that he wants to live. Another example of the numbers here, and more specifically the number 4, is Jacob dunks Richard 4 times, like a baptism, into the ocean to prove his point. They go back to the beach where Jacob states that he is not the devil, but that he brought the black rock to the island, and when Richard asks why, he uses his wine bottle to explain it. The wine, representing the Man in Black, is evil, and the bottle, probably symbolizing Jacob and goodness, is containing the evil, otherwise it would spread. Then he says that the cork represents the island, plugging and holding the darkness where it belongs. The Man in Black is trying to manipulate Richard into doing bad things by making him think that the island isn't actually a real place. Jacob's just being real here. He's basically saying, look, you're on an island right now, this is a real place, this isn't hell, this is what the island is, this is what it's for, it's to keep the world a good place and prevent evil from taking over. Now let's talk about the cork and wine bottle analogy for a second. What if the wine/evil actually represents the energy underneath the island? This energy could have existed for all time, as the title suggests, ab Aeterno, or since the beginning. This doesn't mean that the island is evil, but the cork analogy implies that the island's responsible for controlling this energy or evil force. Some people have the idea that the island is the cork that's literally blocking the gates of hell underneath it. The island could be separate from the rest of the earth, and it could be the closest thing to hell on earth. And the other part of this theory is that Jacob, who could be representing the wine bottle, could be fighting to make sure that hell or evil, as represented by the wine, doesn't spread across the rest of the earth. As we saw in the premiere episode of the season, the flash sideways, the island's at the bottom of the ocean bed. Could this be because the island was uncorked? Who knows? Or it could have something to do with the hatch. I mean, it was said many times by the people pushing the button that we're just saving the world. And this is similar to Jacob this episode, who claims that he's protecting the outside world by keeping evil on the island. We know that Jacob's responsible for everyone coming to the island, and that includes the Dharma Initiative, so he intended for them to come to the island to build their stations and to prevent the release of that energy. The existence of the donkey wheel back in ancient times seems to imply that the electromagnetic energy has been there to begin with. Jacob tells Richard that the Man in Black believes people are inherently bad and corrupted, and that Jacob brings people to the island to prove him wrong. Jacob says he wants the people that come to the island to know the difference between right and wrong without being told, and that he doesn't want to interfere because he wants them to make their own decisions a la free will. But Richard says that if Jacob doesn't step in to help the people he brings, the Man in Black will. Jacob thinks for a second, and then he offers Richard a job as the middleman between Jacob and the people Jacob brings to the island. So when Jacob can't or won't step in to intervene, he wants Richard to do it under his authority. This seems like the first time that someone's challenged Jacob's rule on not intervening, and by having Richard speak on Jacob's behalf, he's essentially making him his own prophet. And at the beginning of this episode, remember when Richard's reading the Bible, it seems to focus on the verse Luke 4:24, which talks about prophets not being accepted in their own country, foreshadowing what's about to happen to Richard. Richard says he'll do it if his wife can come back, something Jacob says he can't do. Then he asks to be absolved from his sins, another thing Jacob says he can't do. But when Richard asks if he can be able to live forever, obviously asking this so he won't die and go to hell, Jacob touches him, allowing him to live forever and never die. And on a side note here, Jacob gives Richard some blankets after he's soaking wet from being in the ocean, and this is sort of like an opposite parallel to the doctor earlier in this episode who orders blankets for the floor instead of Richard, who's also soaking wet. Then Richard goes back to the Man in Black and gives him a white rock from Jacob, showing who owns him now, and also symbolizing that he was brought on a black rock, but now has a white rock to offer. He tells Richard that his offer of joining him will always stand, giving him the cross necklace he found, and disappears. Richard buries his wife's necklace in front of a stone bench next to a tree, and when we zoom out, it kind of looks like a Garden of Eden. The tree looking like the tree of life. We go back to 2007 in the present, where Richard goes to the same spot he buried the necklace and uncovers it. He remembers the offer the man in black left him and yells out that he changed his mind, asking if the offer still stands. Hurley appears and goes, "What offer, dude?" Richard gets mad at Hurley for following him, but Hurley says Isabella sent him. Hurley tells him that she's standing right next to him. She tells Hurley that Richard doesn't believe him, but after some time, Richard starts to believe and turns towards her. Even though Richard can't see her, he still addresses Isabella as she tells Hurley to tell Richard to close his eyes and she'll communicate to him through Hurley. She says it wasn't Richard's fault for her death and that he suffered enough. Richard cries out that he misses her and would do anything to be with her again. She says they're already together, she kisses him and then disappears. Richard puts the necklace on as Hurley states that Isabella said one more thing. He needs to stop the man in black from leaving the island, and if he doesn't stop him, they'll all go to hell. That's nice. And in the distance, the man in black as Flock observes the scene and then turns away. I believe this version of Isabella, like I talked about earlier, is not the man in black. The way she talks is different, the way she's dressed is different, and I think it was, in a sense, a ghost version of her, or it could be from Jacob. This episode ends with Jacob sitting by the man in black in 1867. The white rock that the man in black is holding here is white, polished, and round, and different than the rough and dull one that Richard gave him earlier. The nemesis says that he sent Richard to kill Jacob because he wants to leave the island and asked Jacob to let him go. According to Jacob, as long as he's living, that won't happen. The man in black states that's why he wants to kill Jacob. Jacob says that if for some reason he is successful, he'll just get another one to replace him, to which the man in black says that he'll just kill him too. Jacob grins and then gives him the same wine bottle that he used to describe the island to Richard, then leaves, saying he'll see him around. Under his breath, the man in black says, "Sooner than you think," and smashes the bottle, releasing the wine/evil on the earth. Let's talk about Jacob and the man in black for a bit. Is Jacob the devil, like the man in black saying? Is he telling the truth? Or is the man in black just lying for the sole purpose of getting Richard to kill him? We can't be too sure that the man in black is pure evil like Jacob says he is. I've talked about this in some past recaps, and the producers hinted at it this week that we could be thinking the other way around of who's good and who's evil, but at least in this point in time, it still seems like the most likely case, and we really have no reason to think otherwise. Jacob's not the devil like the man in black says he is. He saves people, he heals the wounded, he doesn't offer temptation, he's trying to keep evil out of the world, and he hasn't killed anyone. Although this makes him sound like God, he isn't God for some obvious reasons. He can't grant Richard absolution from his sins, he can't reunite Richard with Isabella, he needs assistance, and he needs a replacement. Also, as we saw earlier, he can be killed. There were a lot of Christian undertones in this episode, especially with Richard, who is almost like a Christ-like figure. He's a mediator between Jacob, who isn't God but acts like a godlike figure on the island, and his people. And some other similarities. He was sold for coins. He was sentenced to death. He was submerged and baptized sort of in the water 4 times. And he also somewhat denied Jacob 3 times by saying stop it 3 times. He's inside a ship called a rock for 3 days. He's granted eternal life, and he's also sent by Jacob to save his people. Now again, these aren't supposed to be literal connections, they're just symbolism. Alrighty, time for Gus's photo hunt winner. Props to Fata Morgana 84, aka Kristen from Norway. You figured out that this little poster in the background actually belonged to this picture. Congrats, you seem to be owning everyone at these challenges. Good job. Now here's the one for this next week. I'm going to make this really hard for you guys since you seem to be getting all these ones. See if you guys can get this. I seriously doubt you will be able to, but who knows, maybe you will. And remember, the only way to submit your answer is through a video response to this video. And whoever wins the most of these Gus's photo hunt challenges will get a very special shout out at the end of the season, so maybe that's a little more incentive to try to figure these out. Okay, now time for the unanswered questions. The only question I'm going to ask this week that doesn't even have to do with this episode, well, I guess it kind of could, is which is your favorite episode of the entire series? And also put down why you like that particular episode. And this way we can see which episodes seem to be the most popular. I really want to know what you guys think, so write it down in the comment section. Alright guys, that's it for me. Sorry about this recap not being that complete, I guess. I didn't have a lot of time to work on it this weekend, which are the only days I can work on them. But I hope you like what I had. I'll see you guys next week when the episode is The Package, which is a Jin and Sun episode. Please subscribe to these videos. You get them automatically and it helps me out. Appreciate it if you do. I'll see you then, and God bless.